Did you know? The blue faience hippopotamus was a popular statuette in ancient Egyptian art. Ancient Egyptians considered it to have positive traits associated with fertility and rebirth. Also, little hippopotamus statuettes were found among the objects buried in tombs. Varying in size from 9 to 23 centimeters in length, are now scattered around the world. There are around 50 to 60 blue faience hippopotamus statuettes that survive to our times. The hippo from the Brooklyn Museum doesn't have legs, even fake ones. But there is a reason that the ancient Egyptians believed that hippos evoke chaotic forces because of the danger they pose to humans as wild animals in this world. For this reason, they often snapped off the legs of hippopotamus statuettes before placing them in tombs so the hippos wouldn't be able to eat the soul of the deceased. The hippopotamus was also a power for good. Tauret, a hippo goddess, protected women in pregnancy and childbirth. The fattier hippos symbolized fertility and rebirth. It has even been suggested that their color represented the primeval waters from which the world was created, and the lotus, which closes at night and opens in the morning, is another symbol of rebirth. Did you know? Researchers at Leicester University analyzed data on 474,919 people with an average age of 52 in the UK biobank between 2006 and 2016. They found women who walked briskly had a life expectancy of 86.7 to 87.8 years old, and men who kept up the pace had a life expectancy of 85.2 to 86.8. Slow walkers had much bleaker prospects. Women had a life expectancy of 72.4, and men of 64.8 years old if they were more leisurely in their movements. According to the paper, published last week in the journal Mayo Clinic Proceedings, that ratio held true, even if the fast walkers were severely or morbidly overweight. It does not mean fast walkers will live longer. The report only proves a correlation, not a cause and effect, but experts say it suggests walking speed could be a crude way for doctors to judge their patients' general health alongside other tests. It is hardly the first study holding up walking speed as a powerful factor that appears to boost and determine our health. In 2011, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, published a study by geriatric medicine professor Stephanie Studensky of the University of Pittsburgh, who found the same. Walking speed was a reliable predictor of life expectancy. Did you know? Scientists have found a congestion cure that's cheaper than drugs and just as effective, satisfying sex. Having an orgasm during sex was found to clear blocked noses just as well as over-the-counter decongestants for an hour at least, according to a study published in the Ear, Nose, and Throat Journal in January 2021. The research team received an Ig Nobel Prize, an award that celebrates quirky scientific research. Lead researcher Olke Sembulid, a professor and ear, nose, and throat doctor at the SLK clinics in Germany, told Insider he developed a hunch based on self-observation and recruited some colleagues to learn more. They don't yet know how exactly orgasms unblock the nose, but Bullitt told, the combination of sexual arousal, excitement, physical activity, and the climax at the end can possibly help to improve nasal breathing. Exercise and hormonal changes are known to have a short-term effect on how people breathe through their noses, but this is the first study to investigate the effect of sexual activity on nasal breathing. Did you know? The top entry on Microsoft's Bing search engine is for its rival Google, Google has said. The claim was made in court as Google made its case to appeal against a €4.3 billion $5 billion fine from the European Union for abusing its market power. The EU accused Google of using Android's success in the smartphone market to make Google the default search engine. But Google says its service is simply the most popular. We have submitted evidence showing that the most common search query on Bing is, by far, Google, lawyer Alfonso Lamadrid told the EU General Court, as first reported by Bloomberg. People use Google because they choose to, not because they are forced to. Google's market share in general search is consistent with consumer surveys showing that 95% of users prefer Google to rival search engines. Weird jobs you had no idea existed. The food stylist. Over the years, food advertising has come a long way. If you've ever seen a food ad and thought, wow, that looks good, it's not because that's how it's supposed to look. Instead, a highly specialized type of professional called a food stylist made the food look good for the camera. If food stylist sounds like a joke, we assure you that it's absolutely not. You can go to your local employment listings website and find a posting for one of these right now. The job is not easy to do either. Apparently, styling food is an art form that you master after years of persistent practice, which also involves know-how of photography and videography. If you do get your foot in the door and become a food stylist for a local firm, you may work your way up and someday get to style food for the big brands. Needless to say, that pays quite well. Did you know? ASICS is a Japanese multinational corporation that produces sportswear. The name is an acronym for the Latin phrase anima sana in corpore sano, translated by ASICS as a sound, healthy, mind, in a sound body. Products manufactured and marketed by ASICS include footwear, sneakers, sandals, clothing, t-shirts, jackets, hoodies, compression garments, pants, shorts, socks, and accessories, bags, backpacks, caps. ASICS began as Onitsuka Company Limited on September 1, 1949. Founder Keiichiro Onitsuka began manufacturing basketball shoes in his hometown of Kobe, Hyogo Prefecture, Japan. The range of sports activities serviced by the company expanded to a variety of Olympic styles used throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s by athletes worldwide. Onitsuka became particularly renowned for the Mexico 66 design, in which the distinctive crossed stripes, now synonymous with the company brand, were featured for the first time. Martial arts star Bruce Lee was the first known celebrity to popularize this design. Onitsuka Tiger merged with GTO and Gelink to form ASICS Corporation in 1977. Despite the name change, a vintage range of ASICS shoes are still produced and sold internationally under the Onitsuka Tiger label. ASICS generated 171 billion yen in net sales and 13 billion yen in net income in the fiscal year 2006. 66% of the company's income came from the sale of sports shoes, 24% from sportswear, and 10% from sports equipment. 49% of the company's sales were in Japan, 28% in North America, and 19% in Europe. ASICS bought the Swedish outdoor brand Haglöfs for $128.7 million on July 12, 2010. The company announced on October 4, 2011, that it would be the new official kit manufacturer for the Australian cricket team, replacing German manufacturer Adidas. In March 2021, while several Western clothing brands expressed concern over allegations of forced tiger labor involved in Xinjiang cotton production, ASICS announced that it would continue to source cotton from the region. Did you know? Niels Bohr is one of the greatest scientists who ever lived and a personal hero of mine. He was also a favorite of his fellow Danes when he lived in Copenhagen. Today, however, I found out just how much they loved him. After he won the Nobel Prize in 1922, the Carlsberg brewery gave him the gift of a house located next to the brewery. It had a direct pipeline to the brewery, so that Bohr had free beer on tap whenever he wanted. Carlsberg had a passion for science as part of its company culture. They had a laboratory devoted to developing better beer brewing. In 1875, that laboratory was the first to isolate Saccharomyces pastorianus, the species of yeast used to brew pale lagers. The laboratory also made discoveries in protein chemistry that ended up having applications elsewhere. Bohr certainly didn't rest on his laurels after winning the Nobel Prize, which he won for his investigations into the structure of the atom and early work in quantum mechanics. With the help of the Danish government and Carlsberg's foundation, Bohr had founded the Institute for Theoretical Physics in 1921. During the next decade, Bohr worked with physics to lay the foundation of the principles of quantum mechanics, and it was in 1927 that he developed the concept of complementarity, a key principle in quantum mechanics. Complementarity is far from intuitive, and many of the basic concepts of quantum mechanics are similarly hard to grapple with. Indeed, Bohr had a series of famous debates with Albert Einstein, in which Einstein was very reluctant to accept quantum mechanics. Einstein resisted many of its implications for years. Did you know? Estivation is characterized by inactivity and the lowered metabolic rate that is entered in response to high temperatures and arid conditions. It takes place during times of heat and dryness, the hot dry season, which is often the summer months. Invertebrate and vertebrate animals are known to enter this state to avoid damage from high temperatures and the risk of desiccation. Both terrestrial and aquatic animals undergo estivation. The fossil record suggests that estivation may have evolved several hundred million years ago. Organisms that estivate appear to be in a fairly light state of dormancy, as their physiological state can be rapidly reversed and the organism can quickly return to a normal state. A study was done on Atollalactia, a snail native to parts of Europe and northern Africa, showing that they can wake from their dormant state within 10 minutes of being introduced to a wetter environment. The primary physiological and biochemical concerns for an estivating animal are to conserve energy, retain water in the body, ration the use of stored energy, handle the nitrogenous end products, and stabilize bodily organs, cells, and macromolecules. This can be quite a task as hot temperatures and arid conditions may last for months. The depression of metabolic rate during estivation causes a reduction in macromolecule synthesis and degradation. To stabilize the macromolecules, estivators will enhance antioxidant defenses and elevate chaperone proteins. This is a widely used strategy across all forms of hypometabolism. These physiological and biochemical concerns appear to be the core elements of hypometabolism throughout the animal kingdom. In other words, animals that estivate appear to go through nearly the same physiological processes as animals that hibernate. Did you know? The brain is not a unidirectional organ that dominates the rest of the body, says Christoph Hanschen, a muscle researcher and professor of pharmacology at the University of Basel in Switzerland. Rather, there's a mutual interaction between these systems. This emerging evidence has big implications for how exercise can affect cognitive health. We're still scratching the surface, but it's super exciting that we can now address some of the epidemiological links long observed between activity, brain health, neurodegenerative diseases, depression, and mood disorders, which so far have not been understood at all, says Hanschen. Saul Valita, an neuroscientist at the University of California, San Francisco, who studies how factors in the blood rejuvenate the brain, agrees. The body of a 20-year-old is inherently different from the body of a 70-year-old. And somehow, something about exercise can cause a benefit in all these contexts. The key, Valita says, is that exercise's impact on the brain is multifactorial. Activity seems to increase the brain's capacity to regenerate neurons, calm inflammation, and enhance neuron-to-neuron communication. People in their 60s, 70s, and 80s already recognize that regular exercise is key to remaining mentally sharp and independent, according to the second half of life study conducted jointly by the AARP and National Geographic. In an online and telephone survey of 2,580 adults ages 18 and older, people in those age brackets reported a greater appreciation for the value of exercise compared with people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Respondents also reported that brain health is consistently a top concern for people of all ages. Researchers are now eager to figure out exactly how and why exercise improves brain function to develop better recommendations and treatments. The ultimate goal would be to develop a drug that can mimic exercise's effects in the brain, Rodriguez says. This becomes especially important in populations that can't just hop on a treadmill, like people with mobility issues or frailty. Moreover, exercise helps patients whose brain function has already begun to falter. It sparks improvements in learning, attention, and memory in people with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, schizophrenia, or brain injury. Psychologists have noticed exercise's benefits for their patients, too. Exercise can alleviate symptoms of anxiety and depression in pretty significant ways, says Julie Fraga, a psychologist based in San Francisco. It's so beneficial that psychotherapists often prescribe it to their patients, and some even offer walk and talk therapy.
People who get carsick, seasick or airsick are experiencing motion sickness. The condition causes cold sweats, nausea, and vomiting. Women and children are more prone to motion sickness. But it can affect anyone. You can take steps while traveling to reduce your risk of getting sick. Medications like the scopolamine patch can prevent nausea. Motion sickness occurs when your brain can't make sense of information sent from your eyes, ears, and body. Lots of motion in a car, airplane, boat, or even an amusement park ride can make you feel queasy, clammy, or sick to your stomach. Some people vomit. Being carsick, seasick, or airsick is motion sickness. An estimated 1 in 3 people gets motion sickness at some point. Women and children aged 2 to 12 are most at risk. Still, the condition can affect anyone. Your brain receives signals from motion-sensing parts of your body, your eyes, inner ears, muscles, and joints. When these parts send conflicting information, your brain doesn't know whether you're stationary or moving. Your brain's confused reaction makes you feel sick. A team of researchers from Tel Aviv University recently discovered that exposure to ultraviolet radiation from sunlight enhances sex drive in both men and women by affecting the regulation of the endocrine system, which is responsible for producing and releasing sexual hormones. It has been known for many years now that ultraviolet radiation from sunlight increases testosterone levels in males, and we also know that sunlight plays a major role in both the behavioral and hormonal regulation of sexuality, said study co-author Carmet Levy, professor in the Department of Human Molecular Genetics and Biochemistry at the Sackler Faculty of Medicine. However, the mechanism responsible for this regulation remained unknown. Our study enabled a better understanding of this mechanism. Professor Levy and his PhD students Roma Parikh and Ashchar Sarek initially tested their hypothesis with an animal model, exposing mice to ultraviolet radiation type B UVB. The results showed that the hormone levels of females rose dramatically. In addition, the attraction between males and females increased, with both genders being more willing to engage in sexual activities. Scientists found similar effects after administering UVB therapy to 32 human subjects at Tel Aviv Sorsky and Asuta medical centers. Both genders exhibited a marked increase in sex drive, and males also showed increased levels of aggression likely caused by higher releases of testosterone. The skin contains various mechanisms for dealing with radiation from sunlight, and one of these is the p53 protein, explained Professor Levy. We must remember that exposure to UV is dangerous and can damage the DNA, as in the case of skin cancer. At the same time, two built-in programs in the skin, activated following exposure to sunlight, are in place to protect against DNA damage, the DNA repair system and pigmentation, namely the suntan, based on the degree of exposure. By activating both systems, the p53 protein regulates the level of DNA damage. Our study found that the same system also activates the endocrine system of sexuality and potentially breeding. These discoveries could lead to important practical applications, such as UVB treatments for hormonal disorders. However, more research is needed to fully understand how sunlight affects human hormonal, physiological, and behavioral systems. PATH, stylized as PATH, is a network of underground pedestrian tunnels, elevated walkways, and at-grade walkways connecting the office towers of downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It connects more than 70 buildings via 30 kilometers, 19 miles, of tunnels, walkways, and shopping areas. According to Guinness World Records, PATH is the largest underground shopping complex in the world, with 371,600 square meters, 4 million square feet, of retail space, including over 1,200 retail fronts 2016. As of 2016, over 200,000 residents and workers use the PATH system daily, with the number of private dwellings within walking distance at 30,115. The PATH network's northern point is the atrium on Bay at Dundas Street and Bay Street, including a now-closed tunnel to the former Toronto coach terminal, while its southern point is Waterpark Place on Queen's Quay. It's the main north-south axes of walkways generally parallel Yonge and Bay Streets, while its main east-west axis parallels King Street. There is the continuous expansion of the PATH system around Union Station. Two towers being built as part of CIBC Square will be linked to the PATH system, extending it to the east to cross over Yonge Street by a pedestrian bridge into the Backstage condominium building, Esplanade and Yonge Corner, giving closed access to Union Station, Scotiabank Arena, and other buildings in Toronto's financial district. Eric Simons is the kind of young entrepreneur who will do anything to make it. So secretly squatting at the headquarters of internet giant AOL until he was caught wasn't out of the question. Eric Simons squatted AOL's headquarters, right, to build his education startup. Simons has revealed to technology news site CNET how he lived at AOL's headquarters in Palo Alto, California, for 2 months last year while he was 19, eating the company's free food and enjoying staff gym access. He also used the company's lockers for storing his clothes and laundromat for cleaning them and slept on couches outside security patrol areas, all while building a technology startup of his own. Simons managed to stay undetected at AOL after he enrolled in a 4-month startup incubator program, called Imagine K-12, based at its headquarters. The program awarded him $20,000 to work on his education startup and gave him a building badge. After the program ended and his funds dried up, Simons found his building badge still worked. It was then that he decided to start living at AOL to continue work on his startup, ClassConnect. I couldn't afford to live anywhere, Simons told CNET. I started living out of AOL's headquarters. While living and working at AOL on his startup, he would use the gym and showers after work and devised a plan to make sure that he remained undetected, which involved waking up at a certain hour each morning. In Rhode Island, for 1 sparkling minute each night, skyscrapers, tugboats, hotels, a yacht club, and police cruisers send a blinking goodnight message to sick kids inside a children's hospital. A gesture that began with a single light 6 years ago has become a nightly display along the Providence River and a highly anticipated ritual inside Hasbro Children's Hospital. Some of Providence's bigger hotels have installed permanent signals that automatically turn on flashy messages at 8:30 p.m., to the delight of giddy toddlers and older children who can spot them from their windows. The idea began with the hospital's resident cartoonist, Steve Brosnahan, who has spent 26 years regaling sick kids with on-the-spot drawings and word games. Brosnahan, who gets to the hospital by bike or bus, noticed one day in 2010 that he could see his route home from inside the 6-story hospital. Using his bike light and flashlights, he began sending simple messages tailored to individual kids. Late last year, he appealed to local businesses to send a joint message, "Good night, Hasbro," using 4 flashes to represent each syllable. Facebook abandoned an experiment after 2 artificially intelligent programs appeared to be chatting to each other in a strange language only they understood. The 2 chatbots came to create their own changes to English that made it easier for them to work, but which remained mysterious to the humans that supposedly look after them. The bizarre discussions came as Facebook challenged its chatbots to try and negotiate with each other over a trade, attempting to swap hats, balls and books, each of which were given a certain value. But they quickly broke down as the robots appeared to chant at each other in a language that they each understood but which appears mostly incomprehensible to humans. The robots had been instructed to work out how to negotiate between themselves and improve their bartering as they went along. But they were not told to use comprehensible English, allowing them to create their own shorthand, according to researchers. Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, was a Renaissance man who is generally acknowledged as one of the most diversely talented individuals ever to have existed. While his name originally rested on his successes as an artist, he also became known for his sketches and notes on science and invention, including anatomy, botany, paleontology, astronomy. In addition to his well-known creative engineering and scientific talents, Leonardo da Vinci has excellent fame as a land surveyor and cartographer, drawing maps for a broad spectrum of hydroengineering projects for the governors of Vatican, Milan, Florence, and Arezzo, amongst others. The maps below demonstrate Leonardo da Vinci's prodigious talent for geography and cartography. In 1502 Leonardo da Vinci was charged with assisting Cesare Borgia, son of Pope Alexander VI, become more knowledgeable of the town's layout. To do it, he made an innovative map that mixed cutting-edge surveying methods with his artistic vision. The resulting, iconographic, satellite-style map of Imola, Italy map was a step ahead for cartography, modifying it from a somewhat creative artistic practice to an informational asset. In the contemporary age of GPS and satellite and aerial photography, producing an unbiased iconographic plan isn't too tricky. But this Leonardo da Vinci's map predated satellites and airplanes by centuries. The representation of the world that Louisa Bouffardisi creates in the ground plan is based on the distribution of people worldwide. Each nation is shown relative in size to its population, so Australia, with its proportionally small population, is shown dwarfed by its neighbor, Indonesia, with its much larger population. In a traditional world map, these positions would be reversed and Indonesia's archipelago of islands would be dwarfed by Australia's far greater landmass. But even this rendering of what we assume to be a geographical fact is unstable. The Mercator projection of the world, developed in 1569 and widely used ever since, misleadingly makes those countries further from the equator look bigger, and those closest to it, smaller. In this and other works, Bouffardisi questions the veracity of our representations of global geography and politics, basing her wall drawings, installations, and sculptures on statistical data acquired from UNESCO, national censuses, opinion polls, and the CIA World Factbook. In the ground plan, Bouffardisi pictures global population distribution as a series of rooms in a sprawling complex of buildings, each with its door open. The porous boundaries between each room and its neighbor suggest a free passage between borders that is not always reflected in today's geopolitical landscape. The movement of resources, commodities, and people between nations and across borders is under constant surveillance and negotiation, with doors and borders closing or reopening with each new war, refugee crisis, trade pact, and peace agreement. Bouffardisi's wall work shows a rendering of quantitative data as an architectural plan rather than a pie chart or column graph or the sorts of diagrams in which statistical information is generally represented. Her mapping of the global relationship between people and the space they inhabit reflects on not only the unequal distribution of population but, consequently, of wealth, resources, and power. Art can take on many forms, and one of the most exciting aspects of contemporary art is the frequent use of non-conventional materials by artists to create their extraordinary masterpieces. Villu Jaanisu, an Estonian sculptor currently based in Finland, is one such artist that pushes the boundaries of what is considered art by experimenting with different media to create his thought-provoking sculptures. An incredibly impressive example of one of these is his 2018 sculpture Elephant, a monumental work sculpted entirely from recycled tires and steel, which now stands in a public park in Jyväskylä, Finland. Used tires were available, always around, the artist tells My Modern Met. Environmental issues are important in terms of using these. But to me, more important has been the trace their former lives have left to those utilized things that I use for making something new, and also the idea of putting something familiar into a new context. The elephant is only one of Jaanisu's most recent recycled tire sculptures. The sculptor has started to experiment with the rubber material as early as 2001. Alongside this one, the subjects of his tire sculptures have also included a larger-than-life rubber duck, a gigantic gorilla, and towering palm trees. Each one brings a new and unique experience to the viewer, removing some of the more conventional ideas and associations they might have around the objects they are observing. In a way, I see my artworks as reversed landscape paintings, Jaanisu reveals, and my goal in making art has been to create different experiences of nature, light, and space. I believe that looking at sculpture should be an immediate, sensitive act. There is not so much to do with a reason as it is about the feeling. A gaping hole in the surface of the lush green island opens onto a secret beach, with ample shade, sun, and crystal clear water. Playa del Amor, commonly known as the Hidden Beach, is a feature of one of the Marietta Islands, located some 22 nautical miles west of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, at the mouth of Banderas Bay. It looks like something out of a fantasy novel, a wide, sandy cavern with the blue waters of the Pacific rushing in. The Marietta Islands is a group of uninhabited islands formed by underwater volcano eruptions. They are natural wonders, but it was something other than the volcanic activity that brought the Barode Beach to light. It is rumored that the hole that created Hidden Beach was a result of deliberate bombings. The Marietta Islands have always been completely uninhabited, making them ideal sites for military testing by the Mexican government. Beginning in the early 1900s, weapons and artillery were tested on the Marietta Islands, a safe distance from Mexican citizens but not so safe for Marietta topography. Test bombs are the known cause for many caves and rock formations on the island, possibly including the Hidden Beach. The Hidden Beach is invisible from the outside and is only accessible through a long water tunnel that links the beach to the Pacific Ocean. There is approximately 6 feet of space above water level, so visitors can arrive at the beach by swimming or kayaking. The islands remain uninhabited but are frequently visited by tourists who come to enjoy the diverse marine wildlife and the unique tropical Eden of Playa del Amor. After losing her job, the 29-year-old Bronx woman was reportedly living off $100 welfare checks. Unable to pay the rent, her landlord was threatening to evict her and her 10-year-old son. So in a deep depression and not knowing what to do, she found herself on top of the Empire State Building. But Elvita Adams' suicide wouldn't be remembered because it was the first one or the most beautiful one. It would be remembered because, despite the jump, it didn't happen at all. They were so pretty, I wanted to reach out and touch them, she is quoted as saying afterward. Adams climbed over the fence that surrounded the observational platform on the building's 86th floor and leapt. But she'd never find death as something incredible happened. The wind isn't ordinarily thought of as miraculous, but the gust of wind that blew Elvita Adams' body back, landing her just one flight down, was nothing short of extraordinary. On that day, the winds were said to be blowing somewhere between 23 and 38 miles per hour. After jumping, Adams landed on a 2.5-foot ledge on the 85th floor. Reportedly, security guard Frank Clark heard Adams moaning and reached out of the floor's window to pull her into safety. She was then taken to Bellevue Hospital in severe pain, the result of either a broken hip or pelvis. After being treated, she was placed under psychiatric watch while a hospital spokesperson said she was in satisfactory condition. Jacinto Convit Garcia was a Venezuelan physician and scientist, known for developing a vaccine to prevent leprosy and his studies to treat cancer. He played a role in founding Venezuela's National Institute of Biomedicine and held many leprosy-related positions. Among Convit's many honors for his work on leprosy and tropical diseases was Spain's Prince of Asturias Award in the Scientific and Technical Research category and France's Legion of Honor. In 1988, Convit was nominated for a Nobel Prize in Medicine for his experimental anti-leprosy vaccine. Described as a popular hero, He never charged a patient for the care he gave. Convit published his last study at age 100 in 2013. In 1913, 11-year-old Sarah Rector became the richest black girl in America, almost by accident. She had been born into poverty as a member of the Muskogee Nation in Oklahoma in 1902, and received, as did every member of the nation, a plot of undesirable land in the territory when it was made a state in 1907. But unbeknownst to anyone else at the time, Sarah's land had a wealth of oil sitting just below the surface. Eventually, it netted her upwards of $8,000 per day in today's currency. And, perhaps most remarkably for the time, Sarah Rector was able to keep just about all her money. By the time she moved to Kansas City in her late teens, Sarah Rector's net worth was estimated to be greater than $1 million, over $28 million today, spread between oil fields, 2,000 acres of farmland in Oklahoma, and investments in numerous businesses in Kansas City. Her story spread throughout the national news, with both black and white papers dubbing her the richest Negro girl in the world. Science has shown that smiling can lift your mood, lower stress, boost your immune system, and possibly even prolong your life. It's a pretty backward idea. Happiness is what makes us smile. How can the reverse also be true? As Dr. Isha Gupta, a neurologist from IGEA Brain and Spine, explains, a smile spurs a chemical reaction in the brain, releasing certain hormones, including dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine increases our feelings of happiness. Serotonin release is associated with reduced stress. Low serotonin levels are associated with depression and aggression, says Dr. Gupta. Low levels of dopamine are also associated with depression. In other words, smiling can trick your brain into believing you're happy and spur actual feelings of happiness. But it doesn't end there. Dr. Murray Grosson, an otolaryngologist in Los Angeles, points to the science of psychoneuroimmunology, the study of how the brain is connected to the immune system, asserting that it has been shown, over and over again, that depression weakens your immune system. In contrast, happiness, on the other hand, has been shown to boost our body's resistance. What's crazy is that just the physical act of smiling can make a difference in building your immunity, says Dr. Grosson. When you smile, the brain sees the muscle activity and assumes that humor is happening. In a sense, the brain is a sucker for a grin. It doesn't bother to sort out whether you're smiling because you're genuinely joyous or just pretending. Even forcing a fake smile can legitimately reduce stress and lower your heart rate, adds Dr. Sivan Finkel, a cosmetic dentist at NYC's The Dental Parlor. A study performed by a group at the University of Cardiff in Wales found that people who could not frown due to Botox injections were happier on average than those who could frown. And there are plenty more studies out there to make you smile, or at least serve as a reference for why you should. Researchers at the University of Kansas published findings that smiling helps reduce the body's response to stress and lower heart rate in tense situations. Another study linked smiling to lower blood pressure, while yet another suggests that smiling leads to longevity. A sheep farmer in Australia found an artistic way to share his feelings after his aunt died by creating a huge heart featuring hundreds of pregnant ewes. Ben Jackson of New South Wales used a drone to video the scene so it could be played at her funeral in Brisbane, which the sheep farmer could not attend because of a COVID-19 lockdown. Jackson had planned to attend his Auntie Debbie's funeral in Queensland, about 250 miles away, a few days ago. However, the border between the neighboring states was closed to restrict travel because of a coronavirus outbreak. Frustrated by this turn of events, Jackson decided to show his sorrow through sheep art, a technique he has been experimenting with on his farm in Gurya, New South Wales. A few years ago, he started spelling the names of his favorite bands using grain dropped from the back of a truck, reports Rod McGurk of the Associated Press (AP). After spreading the feed, the farmer opened the gate to the large pasture and allowed scores of hungry, mostly pregnant ewes to enter and begin munching away. He captured heart-shaped scene on video, which was later posted on social media. He included her favorite song Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Waters for a soundtrack. Drinking 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day is associated with a longer lifespan and a lower risk of cardiovascular disease compared with avoiding coffee. This is according to research published on September 27 in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology, a journal of the European Society of Cardiology (ESC). The findings of increased longevity applied to ground, instant, and decaffeinated varieties of coffee. In this large, observational study, Ground, instant, and decaffeinated coffee were associated with equivalent reductions in the incidence of cardiovascular disease and death from cardiovascular disease or any cause, said study author Professor Peter Kistler. He is an international leader in cardiac arrhythmia research from the Baker Heart and Diabetes Research Institute, Melbourne, Australia. The results suggest mild to moderate intake of ground, instant, and decaffeinated coffee should be considered part of a healthy lifestyle. All types of coffee were linked with a reduction in death from any cause in the study. The greatest risk reduction was seen with 2 to 3 cups per day, with ground coffee providing the most benefit. Drinking 2 to 3 cups of ground coffee a day was associated with a 27% lower likelihood of death and a 20% reduced likelihood of cardiovascular disease. Before this, there needed to be more information on the impact of different coffee preparations on heart health and survival. Therefore, this study examined the associations between types of coffee and incident arrhythmias, cardiovascular disease, and death using data from the UK Biobank, which recruited adults between 40 and 69 years of age. Cardiovascular disease comprises coronary heart disease, congestive heart failure, and ischemic stroke. Included in the study were 449,563 participants free of arrhythmias or other cardiovascular diseases at baseline. The median age of participants was 58 years, and 55.3% were women. Participants completed a questionnaire that asked how many cups of coffee they drank each day and whether they usually drank instant, ground such as cappuccino or filtered coffee, or decaffeinated coffee. Additionally, they were grouped into 6 daily intake categories: none, less than 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 5, and more than 5 cups per day. The usual coffee type was instant in 198,062, 44.1% participants, ground in 82,575, 18.4%, and decaffeinated in 68,416, 15.2%. Non-coffee drinkers, who served as the comparator group, made up 100,510, 22.4% of the participants.